On my son's 29th birthday, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "The best gift you could give me is to disappear from my life forever." I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. I just smiled, turned, and let him enjoy his party. An hour later, blue lights washed across my garden, and 2 police cars pulled up at the gate. Officers stepped out, took positions by the front door and the side path, and arrested my son. "If you're waiting for me to tell you," I screamed, "I'm sorry to disappoint." I stood very still on the kitchen tiles, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. I thought 2 contradictory things at once. This is the worst day of my life. And at last we were in Broccoli, South London arrests tight together like old friends, the kind of street where you can't sneeze without someone offering you a tissue over the fence. In summer, the bunting from the street market drifts across the high street like someone's let the washing go. In winter, you can hear the wind test every old sash window for weaknesses. I've lived here long enough to know which foxes to ignore and which ones to clap at if you want your bins left alone. My name's Margaret Whitmore, though everyone from Schoolgate days still calls me Maggie. My boy is Jamie James on his birth certificate because his father, Peter, insisted on something that would look proper on a form. Peter's gone now, left for a woman who loved sailing and brunch and put neon, then left her for someone else. He sends cards with sunsets on them from places that look like desktop wallpapers. I save them in a drawer with rubber bands and keys I've forgotten the origins of. I don't know why I save them. Dab it, probably. Women like me have a lifetime of tidy habits you can't see until they're all you have left. It didn't start. With blue lights, these things never do. They start in small, miserly ways. A lie tucked into a joke. A promise that sounds like a plan if you don't stare at it too hard. When Jamie left college, he lasted a year in marketing before the vibe offended him. He came home with a suitcase and a grin. "Just until I get my own place sorted, ma'am," he said. It's a flat sprout like mushrooms if you walk around the right parks after rain. At first, it was nothing. Odd hours. Second phone, he laughed off his work parcels arriving under names that belonged to no one I'd ever invited to dinner. "Drop shipping, Mum," he said, proud of the syllables. "It's legit. Everyone does it." They do. Maybe they don't do it like that. I wanted to believe him in the way people want to believe diets that allow cake. He was my son. Don't plant a seed and spend 29 years convincing yourself it's going to become a lemon tree only. To decide it's a weed because it had the nerve to grow sideways. Then the letters started. Brown envelopes from banks I'd never held a card for, polite as a burglar with good shoes. Lending decision declined, one chirped, in my name. And with my date of birth, I stood in the hall and let the draft creep under the door. A mobile contract followed, also mine, delivered to my address, handset never seen. Then the cold pink scold of a county court claim. I lined them up on the kitchen table with the biscuit tin between us, like it might bribe the truth into behaving, Jamie. I said that evening, careful, as if tone could put a leash on facts. "What's this?" He didn't look. He took a biscuit. "Custard creams have witnessed more of British life than most judges." "Seriously, Mum? Don't make a whole production. My mate used your details for a phone. Need it? I'll clear it. Those letters are just admin. Chill." I put the kettle on because I am British, and when you don't know what to do, you put the kettle on. But that night, after the house did its little sigh and settled, I sat at the dining table with my laptop and learned a new language, CIFAS. Protective registration, action fraud, ghost broking, courier fraud, words that taste of metal and make your shoulders creep up towards your ears. I filled in forms until my eyes sanded themselves over. I rang numbers and sat on hold, while a recorded voice told me my call was important and played me something plinky to make me docile. The next morning, I trotted down to the station with my folder. The front desk sergeant was kind, but had that look you get when you've eaten too many biscuits at other people's wakes. "This is mostly civil, madam," he said. "You've done the right things. Speak to your bank. Get the markers on. We're snowed under, you know." I did know. We all know. We've read the headlines. We put our hands in our pockets and try not to feel around too hard in case our fingers find the truth. 3 days later, a knock. Not the polite kind, not the posties, 2 taps and a cheerful slide of envelopes. It was Mr. Pritchard from number 12. Cardigan with the burn hole and hearing aid that feeds back when he stands too near the microwave. "Maggie," he said, mild panic making his eyebrows brave. "You're good with computers, love. People always say that when what they mean is, you're not frightened of them, and I am." He lifted his landline handset like a relic. "My bank's on the phone. They says there's been, funny business. They're sending a chap to collect my cards so he can destroy them." "Police," he said. "Who said?" I asked, stomach gone tight. He showed me the number on the little screen, an 0300 number, innocuous as a GP appointment. I took the phone, listened to a voice smooth as cream, announce itself as the Metropolitan Police Fraud Department. "Breath. No, you're not," I said quietly, and put the phone down. "Arthur, make us a tea. We're going to ring your bank on the number on your card, and you're not handing anything to anyone." He trembled while the kettle boiled. I wrapped both his hands around the mug when I passed it to him because there are things you can't do with only your own hands. After Mr. Pritchard went home, alive and in possession of his plastic, I rang Action Fraud again. They took details, gave me a reference number that looked like an unsuccessful postcode, and told me to call my bank. I did that too. "We've put a protective marker on your file, Mrs. Whitmore," the woman said, her voice cheerful in that way people are when they don't want to say the word sorry too early. "It'll make credit checks harder for a while." "Good," I said. I thought about telling Jamie that harder could be a kind of mercy, but he came in that evening with vouchers for a steakhouse and a story about mates and opportunities, and I kept my mouth tame. You learn to notice things when you have decided to pay attention. Boys hanging near doors who look like they're waiting for girlfriends, but don't brighten when women appear. Padded envelopes in my recycling bin I didn't remember opening. A cheap phone on my sideboard that hadn't been there at breakfast. "Jamie," I said, picking it up by the corner like one does with something sticky at a picnic. "What's this?" He glanced over. "This must be yours," he said lightly. "From the market?" "You love a bargain." He popped it into his pocket, and I felt something inside me do a quiet, decisive click. It's like a lock you didn't know was there finding its home, so I followed him. Badly, I'm 57 and have a knee that rewards honesty, but London helps you spy because London doesn't care. I trailed him from the high street, past the charity shop that sells the same coat every winter as if it can't bear to leave, down towards the railway arches where the storage units squat in neat, brazen rows. He went in with a backpack, came out without it, and with a look I knew from boys who've just got away with nicking crisps from the corner shop. Exhilaration, then guilt, then justification. He had 2 phones, and he moved like someone who'd been told he was in a film. I didn't confront him. He'd learn not to. When truth matters more than theater, I booked an appointment with a detective whose name I got after the right person at the station read the right sentence. D. Amelia Rowe, Lewisham Sid, sat me down in a room that smelled like carpet cleaner and pragmatism, and let me empty my folder like a woman who's finally found a place for all her frustrations to line up. She didn't flinch. "We've had a run," she said. Tidy bun, unamused by the world. Courier fraud, reshipping, stolen jewelry moving through storage units, elderly victims conned over the phone. Doesn't sound like your lad invented the game, but he might be playing for the wrong team. I don't want to ruin his life, I said. I want him to stop taking bits out of other people's. Good, she said. It helps when the motive's clean. She explained what they'd need. Not my hunches, not my love, not my anger, but proof that could stand up in a room where people are paid to avoid believing you. Get out of the one for all the why do I wait what I go why the when wall when where you want to go or when why what's the cool fall when we move how we roll and we in my bin with date stamps, log of his visits to the storage place. It's times, plates, faces, if I could get them without sticking my head into trouble. Her team would seek a production order for the storage. Unit CCTV, if they could tie him to a hand over him carrying stolen goods, offense paying, movements in and out, they'd have a case. I'm not a spy, I said. You're not going to be one, she replied. You're going to make tea and write things down. So I did. 3 months, I lived 2 lives. The one with the washing and the GP appointments and the weather. And the other, smaller one, where I wrote neatly in a notebook a list of times. And dates, number plates, distinguishing features, scar on left eyebrow, red Nike cap, white Transit with one missing hubcap. I poured tea for Mr. Pritchard and pretended my hands weren't shaking. I asked Jamie if he'd like a roast on Sunday and pretended I wasn't counting the hours until he disappeared again. I emailed Amelia Rowe photos of things other people would have called rubbish, and she wrote back helpful in a tone that kept me from flinging myself off bridges built of my own melodrama. Then, the week before Jamie's birthday, Amelia rang. We've got a window, she said. Handover at a unit in New Cross, Saturday afternoon. Jewelry and watches from an address in Kentish Town. Going to a buyer we've been after for months. We think your son is the courier. If he turns up caring, we'll take the lot. I sat very still. The kettle clicked off. Fox screamed. In the alley, like a woman being murdered by a cat? What do you need from me? To be ordinary, she said. If he calls, answer. If he wants to see you, see him. Just don't be clever. Let us do that part. So I met my son for coffee at the cafe on the corner, bunting flapping against a sky that was trying not to rain. He arrived 10 minutes late as he always did, good at being late in a way that made other people feel early. He'd shaved badly. Wore aftershave that understood its job was to hide fear and smiled at the waitress the way boys do when they want to see themselves on someone else's face. Happy birthday, love, I said, meaning the word and resenting it for its innocence. He sipped his flat white like a man drinking from a trophy. Best gift you could give me, he said, leaning back, eyes bright and hard, is to disappear. He said it like ordering a cake he didn't have the money for and expecting the waiter to pretend he did. All right, I said. I stood up. It startled him. It wanted a scene, the kind that leaves you the hero of your own embarrassment. He wanted something to talk about later that made me the villain. I wouldn't give it to him. Enjoy your day, I added, and left by. The time I reached the zebra crossing, my phone rang. Mrs. Whitmore, said Amelia. He's on the move. Your work here is done. Put the kettle on. I walked home, bought milk I didn't need, sat at my kitchen table like women have sat at tables for hundreds of years, waiting, refusing. To be nobody, I didn't tidy the table. I didn't wipe a counter that didn't need wiping. I let the clock tell me what time was doing. At 1:10, my phone lit up with Jamie's name. I let it ring twice. Hi, love, I said. Just checking you got home, he said, too smooth. I did. Can I pop by later? I'm busy, I said, because I will never again be anyone's soft rehearsal. He made a noise halfway between a laugh and a snarl and hung up. At 14 minutes past, Amelia rang again. We've got him, she said. 2 bags. Jewels? In watch rolls, cash, burner phones. He ran. PC Hughes ran faster. He's on his way to custody. We'll be round with a warrant. Consent would be easier. You have it, I said. I'll put the kettle on. I won't describe the search in detail. It deserves the dignity of understatement. They were careful and apologetic and thorough. PC Hughes, cheeks pink with the shame of rifling through someone's drawers, found a shoebox of old mobiles in the airing cupboard, wrapped up in a towel like contraband babies. They took photos and labeled bags and looked relieved when I offered biscuits because no one likes to feel like a vandal in a kitchen. Amelia stood by the window, hands behind her back like a head teacher who doesn't want to interrupt assembly, and said, He's angry. That's normal. Is he frightened? I asked, the question pettier than it sounds. Not yet, she said. By evening, the house belonged to me again. I changed the locks not because he'd try to get in, but because a lock is a kind of prayer you make to yourself. I will protect you. I texted Mr. Pritchard and told him he was safe, for now, said bless you as if I'd brought him soup. I sat down with my cold tea and let it be cold on purpose. The next day, magistrates. Jamie slouched in the dock like he'd missed his bus, and it was all terribly unfair. Bail with conditions. Living at a declared address not mine. Curfew. Report twice weekly. No contact with co-defendants. No visiting any storage facilities. He texted me that evening. "You did this." My fingers wrote, "You did this." Then deleted it. I wrote, "I will be here when you're ready to be my son again." He left me on red. It astonishes me sometimes how much power a small gray tick can have. Weeks pass in a very ordinary way. While your life is rearranging itself into something you won't recognize until you've lived in it for a month. Went to my GP. I bought fruit. I listened to the radio and let a woman tell me about a giant marrow in Lincolnshire. I took a walk along the Thames and watched the water be impressed by absolutely nothing, the way London water never is. Amelia rang when she could. "We've tied him to 3 handovers," she said briskly. "Text CCTV. There are older men crying on tapes, Mrs. Whitmore. There's a couple in their 70s who gave a lad their life savings because he sounded exactly like their grandson. When he was 12 and sincere, she wasn't trying to hurt me with the details. It hurt anyway. He went no comment in an interview because some duty solicitor told him that's how you play. The CPS charged him with conspiracy to defraud and possession of criminal property. He pled guilty. Eventually, reality is a persuasive language if you give it time. 2 years, said the judge, brisk as a hairdresser when you've been indecisive about fringes. Half inside, half on license. It could have been more, it could have been less. Justice is a ledger that never quite adds up neatly, but I would have accepted any number that had the word stop attached to it. I didn't go to the sentencing. I went the week after to visit. I wanted to be the sort of mother who shows up without offering excuses like mints. Prison visiting rooms, smell of disinfectant and something sugary that never quite overpowers it. Jamie walked in a gray tracksuit that made him look like all the boys I've ever told to slow down near swimming pools. He sat opposite me and looked at my hands. He has my father's hands. He never knew my father, not really. Life is full of inherited things that ring no bells when they arrive. "Did you mean it?" I asked finally, "what you said at the cafe about disappearing?" He grimaced and then slumped. "No," he said. "Yes. I don't know. I wanted you to stop looking at me like I was still 12. Seeing the boy," I said, "is the only thing that will get us through to the man. You've built things with lies for a while now. It's time to build something that holds." He snorted and then smiled despite himself. "Sounds like something that'd be on a tea towel, ma'am." "It is," I said. "That's why it's true." He wrote me letters after that bloated cursive. Words that circled themselves because penitence doesn't know how to walk in a straight line. He asked for books. I sent him poetry because poems are the only short things that can make you bigger, he wrote. "This is weird." I wrote, "Being changed always is," he wrote. "Stop being right." No. When he came out, he was a lad pretending to be a man, pretending to be a lad. He stayed on a friend's sofa that smelled of beer and attempts. He took a legitimate job delivering parcels and laughed about the irony before he stopped laughing. Probation sent him to a joinery course in Deptford 2 evenings a week. He brought me a wonky stool with pride that tasted like humility, warming for the first time. "It's dreadful," I said, "because I am my grandmother's mouth." "Brilliant," I added, "because I am my own better self." He beamed. On his 30th birthday, he came with a supermarket cake and the look of a person who has rehearsed not crying. "Sorry," he said, without decorations. I meant it, that day about disappearing. I don't now. I don't. "Want you to do good?" I said. I never did. Sometimes I walk past the cafe where he asked me to vanish. The bunting is always tired, the coffee always decent. I look at the table and think, I didn't disappear. I moved out of your line of sight and into the place where consequences live. Then I waited on the other side of them. The truth is never neat. People want the tidy beau mother turns in son. Son reforms. All forgiven. It isn't like that.
At son?
Daisy forgets to text. Some days I want to rip the stool apart for the joy of breaking what he made. Some days our roast dinner's done right, and the taste of gravy that remembers weekends when his father, useless in so many other ways, could make a Yorkshire pudding rise like a prayer. Most days are neither tragic nor triumphant. Kettle, a bus, a boy who is trying not to be a boy. A woman who refuses to be a stage prop in anyone else's tragedy. If you want a lesson, have this small one. Disappearing isn't always about leaving a room. Sometimes it's about stepping out of a story you didn't consent to and letting the law write the next few pages. It's about making tea while other people do their jobs. It's about remembering that love is not the same thing as alibi, and that a mother's heart can hold both fear for her child and compassion for the people. He's hurt without either emotion, needing to pretend the other is impolite. And if you want a proper British ending, you'll have to be satisfied with the rain is threatening, the bus is late, the foxes will get the bins if I don't put a brick on the lid. My son knocks once on the glass and then lets himself in, puts the stool still wonky by the table and sits. Cuppa, says. Go on then, I reply. He fills the kettle and it begins its familiar grumble. We don't say everything. That could be said. We say enough. The water boils. The world doesn't end. The tea is strong. It will do. The Sunday after the cake and the stool. A letter arrived with the crest of the National Probation Service faint on the corner, as if even the printer had second thoughts. Inside, an invitation to something called restorative justice. A polite offer to meet if both sides consented a facilitator. A room in a community center that smelled of floor polish and hope. The chance for people harmed by the scam to tell someone involved what it felt like. I read it twice, then 3 times, then rang the number. The woman on the line had that careful voice social workers get when they've learnt to be kind without promising miracles. It isn't about forgiveness, she said. It's about information finding the right ears. You can decline. Can he? I texted Jamie a photo of the letter with, I've been asked. Think about it. He rang. Do you want to? He asked. Remarkably adult? I don't know, I said. But I think Mr. Pritchard would. He exhaled, long. All right. If he does, I'll go. We met 2 weeks later in a hall off Lewisham Way with a water cooler that apologized for itself every 5 minutes. The facilitator, Lena Cardigan, the color of new leaves, opened with a speech that was mostly rules. Listen, don't justify. Say what happened to you without turning it into what happened to everyone else. Leave if you need to. Mr. Pritchard sat straight-backed Bess Cardigan, hearing aid humming under the fluorescent light. There was also a couple in their 70s, the Potters, who reminded me of a picture on a charity flyer dyed grief. Heroic Biscuits. Jamie came in with his probation officer, Mr. Collins, a man whose tie had lost its battle with gravity on more than one occasion. Jamie sat, hands flat on his knees as if ready to be searched for excuses and relieved to find none. He looked at Mr. Pritchard and then looked away. Lena nodded to Mr. Pritchard. Arthur, she said, do you want to start? He cleared his throat. I got a phone call, he said they was from the bank. They knew things. Account numbers. My address. Sounded like my grandson, that voice. I'm old, but I'm not thick. Still, he tapped his temple gently. You get caught out when you're frightened. He looked at Jamie, steady. What you lot did. He shook his head, not angrily. It's the cheek of it. The nerve. Pinching the trust we've got left. Jamie swallowed. He stopped, and I had to resist the urge. Maternal to finish his sentence for him. I was a courier, he said finally, each word placed like a brick. I carried things other people stole, jewelry, watches, sometimes cash. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone proper because I didn't make the phone calls. That was a lie. I'm sorry. The Potters spoke next. They had handed over 5,000 pounds in cash to a boy at their door because the voice on the phone had said the police needed the serial numbers to stop a fraud. We thought we were being clever, Mrs. Potter said, hands folded tight as a clasp. Part of the solution. When you came back later and asked for the card, we realized we've been married 52 years. We haven't been that embarrassed since 1973, when Ken put diesel in the Cortina. We laughed. It didn't feel wrong. Ken smiled like a man who has carried a day further than he expected to. Jamie said, I can't give you your embarrassment back. I can pay some money when I can. I can do work if you need something fixed. I'm learning wood, Mr. Potter said, amused. We've got a gate that's more wobble than hinge. We'll send someone through the scheme, Mr. Collins interjected, quick, herding us back onto the official path. Community. Payback hours can be directed towards local needs. The meeting took an hour and 20 minutes. No one wept. No one forgave. No one left early. On the way out, Mr. Pritchard patted Jamie's arm with a hand that had once swung a hammer for 30 years at the depot and said, Don't be a Wally, which is a benediction where we live. Outside, under a sky that couldn't decide, Jamie stood with his hands in his pockets like a schoolboy after a telling off he knows he deserved. Do you hate me? He asked. I thought of all the times women put their hands over small burns and say they're fine. No, I said. I hate what you did to my neighbors. He nodded. Good. Me too. Probation is part appointment, part surveillance, part test. You don't get a mark for until you fail it. Jamie wore an ankle tag for a while, a silent weight that beeped if he tried to pretend time wasn't a thing. Curfew at home, not home, drug tests that were remarkably boring. Check-ins with Mr. Collins where the furniture looked like it was built to withstand. Men who couldn't. Twice a week in Deptford, he shaved corners off blocks until the blocks admitted. They'd been corners all along. He learnt dovetails that didn't gape, and how to use a plane without treating it like a threat. He got a legit job at a delivery firm, who hired ex-offenders deliberately. He pedaled a bicycle with a big yellow box until his calves became a part of the city I recognized. He developed opinions about postcodes. SE13's all right, he said. W1 can do one. We came round on Sundays for roast if he could. And if he couldn't, he texted, I'm not avoiding you. I'm just working. I tried to take each text as a small coin placed where a debt used to be demanded. Tasha turned up with a plant and a fringe that didn't suit her, just one way. To tell a woman is trying. I'm moving to Brighton, she said, hefting the pot like it might tell her which way the sea was from here. New job, new, whatever. She looked at the kitchen clock. Do you think he'll be all right? He might be, I said. He might not be. The first part helps with the second. She nodded. You're very calm, she said. I've had practice, I replied. One Saturday in late autumn, Peter turned up my ex-husband's lightly damp and carrying a paper bag that suggested he hoped pastry could make up for years. He stood on the step like a man at a door that might be the right one if he smiled properly. Mags, he said, and I bristled at the name out of habit. Heard about Jamie? Heard, I said. Because sometimes repeating someone's words back to them is kinder than pressing for detail. I could have a word, he said vaguely. Bloke I sail with knows a fellow at a firm. The sentence fluttered its hands, looking for a noun that would save it. With what, I asked? The past? He flinched, pride stubbed. I was going to bring money, he began. It, I said, literally. Put it in an ISA. Buy yourself a moral compass and a decent coat. He laughed genuinely, and then ran out of places to put his hands. We had tea. He admired the stool. Wonky, he pronounced, like a surveyor. A working memory, I said. He left with half the pastries and a promise to come to dinner. He hasn't yet. That's all right. Some debts never fall due. Jamie's old life did not go quietly, just because he did. In November, a number with no name sent him a message. 1 run. Clean. 2 grand. He stared at it as if he could flatten its power by looking long enough. He showed me, which is an act braver than it looks. Delete it. I said. He didn't. Ring your probation officer, I said. He didn't. What are you afraid of? I asked finally. Not earning, he said, feeling small. He dropped the phone like it had stung him. What if the world doesn't want me unless I'm fast? Make it want you slow, I said. He rolled his eyes in that way boys do when they're... Mothers hang aphorisms on the washing line and hope the wind will make them look like flags. He went for a walk. He walked past the arches, past the cafe. past the old flat where he once lived for 6 months, in a kind of stubble and styleless chaos. He ended up at the bus stop where Mr. Pritchard sat with a bag of carrots and a newspaper folded exactly in half. "All right, son," Arthur said, because he calls everyone son, though he reserves it for boys who haven't earned man yet. Jamie sat down. He stared at Arthur's hands. He stared at the sky. He deleted the message right there. He didn't tell me until later, I knew anyway. There's a silence men make when they have chosen the right thing, and it is quieter than bad. Choices ever are. December threw rain at the city, as if someone had a grudge. Jamie turned up for Christmas dinner with a plastic bag full of sprouts no one asked for, and a grin that tried to pay rent. He put his hand on my shoulder when I carried the gravy and I let it stay. We watched stupid telly. We didn't mention the stool, didn't mention the men he hurt. We let turkey and pudding and the Queen's speech that wasn't anymore carry their own weight. He fell asleep on the sofa like he was 8, covered him with a blanket, and told the foxes in the alley to show some respect. January brought a letter with a logo that didn't announce itself. Greenslode and Sons Joinery, Deptford Creek, a traineeship starting March. "We liked your application," it said. "Your tutor speaks highly. We need someone who can take instructions and make clean mistakes." Clean mistakes, cried, which is ridiculous. A letter about what undid me more than court dates had. He stood in the kitchen and read it twice, like it might change between paragraphs. "They want me," he said softly. "They do," I said, "because you've made yourself wantable." He went shopping with me for boots the next day, the proper kind that understand floors. He spent an hour too long choosing a pencil. He bought a shirt he called proper and wore it under a hoodie because transformation is incremental. Texted me the first day, "Sand everywhere. Love it." And then sent a photo of his thumb with a plaster on it, which is the traditional tattoo of honest work, the restorative justice. Scheme sent word of an opportunity to contribute to a scam awareness talk at the church hall. I said I would bake and bring chairs. The constable seconded to the Safer Neighborhood team asked if I'd say a few words. "Just what you did, what you wish you'd known, the number 159 thing," she said. Not to frighten, just to arm. I rang Amelia Rowe, who sounded tired in the professional way, and said, "I'll come if I can. We've got a surge on romance scams." January is the month for men who call themselves Gavin and ask widows for Amazon vouchers. We filled the hall. The chairs complained. I set out biscuits shaped like shields because I am unsubtle when I have an idea. Arthur sat in the front row, cardigan best again, hair flat as the truth. I spoke about letters and bins and learning. The names of things so you can tell them to go away. Ring 159. If a caller says they're your bank, I said. Hang up, use the number on your card. Banks won't ask for your PIN, your card, or your phone. Amelia spoke about not being embarrassed. We've all been fooled, she said. I have, and I wear a warrant card. Jamie didn't speak. He stacked chairs and fetched water. People smiled at him without knowing why. There is a shape to remorse that makes your shoulders honest. In February, Greenslad put Jamie on a small job with a big heart, a bench for the tiny library that's sprouted in the corner of the park by the railings. He came round with sawdust in his hair, looking like every boy in a poem about possibility, and said, "You'll have to come sit on it." If it wobbles, I said, "I'm telling everyone your full name." Fair, he said. On a Wednesday, in March, a lad called Callum started at the workshop. A squirrel of a boy with a chip on his shoulder he kept trying to use as a shelf. He looked at Jamie like he might be a rival or a mirror. Apprenticeships are funny. Your family's built on sand and offcuts. Jamie watched him nick a chisel from the rack and watched him put it in his backpack. He told me later at my table, stirring tea like it had secrets. "What did you do?" I asked. I told him, Jamie said, "Mate, if you're going to be stupid somewhere they can't sack you. And if you need a thing, ask. That's the job. Learning to ask." He gave it back. He cried in the bog for 10 minutes. Then he came out and asked for a pencil. "Good," I said. "Remember to be kind, but not soft." "I know," he said. "It's a line, In it. It is. Spring remembered itself. Daffodils showed off. The foxes taught their cubs their rude noises. On a Thursday after work, Jamie turned up with an envelope, placed it on the table like contraband. "What's this?" I asked. 200 quid, he said. "For Mr. Pritchard. Don't tell him it's from me. Tell him it's from the bench." "All right," I said, and delivered it through a fiction because sometimes truths are better worn as costumes. In April, the CPS sent a letter about compensation orders, a small amount monthly, towards the people hurt. It won't buy dignity back. It will buy gas. Jamie set up a standing order. He asked me to check the numbers because he doesn't trust himself around money yet. I did, and resisted the itch to correct his spelling in the payee field. He'll learn. Peter came to dinner once in May. He brought a woman called Laura, whose laugh came out sideways. He tried to talk football. Jamie let him. He tried to talk politics. Changed the subject to gravy. He left at 9 with a promise. To ring he didn't. The next week he messaged me to ask if I'd heard about a brilliant investment opportunity. I sent him the action fraud link and the word no. He replied with a thumbs up and a photo of a sunset that looked like a stock image. Men like Peter are always in golden hours somewhere else. In June, almost a year on, Jamie took me to the park and made me sit on the bench he'd helped with. It didn't wobble. It had a little plaque for everyone who needed somewhere to catch their breath. Donated by Greenslade and Sons. He ran his hand over the grain the way you do when you're proud of something and trying not to look like you are. "Feel that?" he said. "It's like a sentence finished. Or one begun." I said. He rolled his eyes and then nodded. The way sons do when their mothers have the audacity to be right on a sunny day. "You want to know if it's neat now?" It isn't. He missed a probation appointment once, because a lorry opened in front of his bike and spilled boxes like a conjurer. He got a warning, hit a row with his boss, and sulked for 3 days like a thundercloud that forgot how to move. He texted me at 2 a.m. after seeing an old mate outside a pub who smelled of old choices and said, "I want to be him for 10 minutes. I replied, "Have a shower. Want to be yourself for 11? He sent a laughing emoji and then a photo. Of his shampoo? I hate emojis. I keep them anyway. We did the scam awareness talk again in the autumn. Bigger room, better biscuits. An old woman stood up and said, "I was conned. They took $2,000. I told my daughter, and she told me off." Amelia said, "Find a new daughter," and the room howled. Jamie stood by the urn and poured tea as if that were sacrament. Afterwards, a man who used to teach science at the secondary school shook his hand and said, "It takes guts to stand where people can see you." And Jamie went pink in a way that made me think of his first nativity in reception, where he refused to be a shepherd and insisted on being a cloud. One night in November, a car idled outside my house too long. I looked out. 2 men, not London men, the country stamped on their shoes. One got out, walked to my gate, looked at my door, looked at the cameras the council had put up after a spate of thefts, and got back in. I rang Amelia. She said, "We've got eyes on the Fences associates. They know who talked and who didn't. Keep your lights on. We're on it." I made tea. I locked the back door. I told the house aloud, "You are not defenseless." The pipes made contented noises, and the fridge hummed like a fat bee. The car went. I didn't tell Jamie until 2 weeks later, when it could be a story, not an alarm bell. He went very still, and then he said, "Thank you for not making it my job," which is a sentence that means we're getting there. On his 31st birthday, came round with a cake he'd actually baked dense. Too much orange, icing a crime and a new thing, a key. He held it up like a treaty. "Only if you want," he said. "And only if it means the right thing." "What's the right thing?" I asked. "That I can come in," he said, "but not to hide." He grinned, sheepish. "And to put the kettle on." I put the key on the hook by the door. It looked right there, among the others whose locks I've forgotten. He made tea. We ate terrible cake. He told me about Callum passing his first assessment and Mr. Collins getting promoted and a fox that had tried to make off with a chisel and been thwarted by geometry. We didn't mention the bench. We didn't mention the boys he used to run with. We let the present be heavy enough to hold itself. Before he left, he glanced at the stool by the table, the first thing he ever made with his hands that wasn't a mess. He crouched, tipped it, and pulled a small wedge out of his pocket. Oak. Smooth. He tapped it into the joint that had always sulked. The stool settled. It didn't wobble. He looked up at me like a boy who's brought home a reading certificate. There, he said softly, I've been meaning to. We sat on it, one of us at a time, because it's still only a stool. It held. We laughed. Outside, someone shouted at a dog called Winston. A bus sighed. The day was itself. If you want to be strict about it, the story ends the moment the blue lights washed my garden and men in boots decided to make paperwork in my kitchen. But if you want to be honest, it ends here, as all good British stories do, with a kettle, a seat that finally does its job, and a promise made so quietly you could mistake it for the sound the house makes when it breathes. I don't teach lessons, I make tea. I open windows. I use people's proper names. And when my son tries to become a man, I say, all right then, show me. He does. Not every day. Enough, that will do.